They told us how to survive. But not where we were standing. No one said anything about the air. Cold ground boots on the line, same routine every night. Nothing changed, that's what I thought, till the silence started talking back. Engine screamed, pressure climbed, felt it shift but no design. No report, no words, no clue, just something moving through. No signal, no command, just something you don't understand. No one gave me a memo, no one said prepare for the weight and the silence or the charge in the air. No one gave me a memo, no one drew the line where the world stops behaving the way it's designed. The way it's designed. Radar sweeps, spending light. Things don't track the way they should. Men walk in, men walk out. Something leaves them hollowed out. Eyes don't lie, voices shake like something followed them awake. You don't ask, you don't say, you just count another day. You feel it, you don't speak. Like the ground is getting weak. No one gave me a memo, no one said be aware of the shift in the pattern of something already there. No one gave me a memo, no one told us why things don't follow the rules they're supposed to comply. What if it's not the night? What if it's not the light? What if it's something we built, something we don't control? Fields on fields, signal on skin, you don't know where it begins. You don't know where it. You don't know where it. No one gave me a memo, but I'm saying it now. There are things in this space we don't yet know how. No one gave me a memo, so I'm drawing the line between what we experience and what we deny. No one gave me a memo, but I stood there that night and I felt something shift just outside of sight. We were already inside it.
Hi, this is Major Lori Rehfeldt with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. Now, today I want to take you into a place where things didn't quite behave the way they should. Not in theory, not in speculation, but on an active U.S. Air Force bases with trained personnel who knew exactly what they were looking at. At RAF Lakenheath, Barry Caton was doing what he'd been trained to do, maintaining aircraft, overseeing operations, and working inside a system built on precision and predictability. He was sharp, trusted, and on the fast track. But something changed when he got there. The environment around him began to feel off. Not chaotic, not right, something that was operating alongside the normal flow of the base life, unseen but present. And he wasn't the only one who felt it. At the same time, just miles away at RAF Upper Hayford, Dan Isbell encountered something more direct. But before we go further, you need to understand who he is. He is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, combat fighter pilot, and experimental test pilot, someone selected to fly aircraft at the very edge of their limits, the kind of world that made famous by pilots like Chuck Yeager, where pushing beyond what's known isn't the exception, it's the job. Like they say, it's not just a job. He flew high-performance aircraft, including extreme altitude missions in the U-2, where the curvature of the Earth becomes visible. He worked across multiple aircraft platforms, evaluating systems, pushing performance boundaries, and operating inside some of the most advanced aerospace programs in the military. And beyond that, this young man, I should say, I'm so impressed with him, and Barry. He's a physicist, go figure. He's someone trained to understand the laws that govern motion, energy, and flight itself. He's the perfect person that I need to have on this show so he could explain a lot to me, so I can understand more of what was going on with the energy at RAF base Bentwaters and Woodbridge. So when he tells you he saw something he could not explain, that matters, because what he encountered didn't fit. A craft, controlled, silent, moving with intention, no visible propulsion, no conventional behavior, not drifting, not malfunctioning, operating. 2 men, 2 bases, same region, same time frame. And it overlapped also on December 26th, what happened at the Rendlesham Forest incident in December 26, 1980. One sensing something in the environment, the other coming face to face with it. And when experiences like these begin to line up, you have to ask a different kind of question. Not just what was in the sky, but what was happening to the space itself. So we have a lot to talk about, and I so look forward to hearing what they have to share. This is going to be an exciting podcast. Thank you. I'm so honored to have you on, because I know you are, not only were you an Air Force pilot, you must have been a lot of fun to be around in England. I think I would have liked to have hung out with you. And not only that, you were a test pilot. You flew planes like the U-2. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
I actually saw the U-2 fly over the White House. I think it was heading to the graveyard in Tucson. It was like the last flyover. But it just caught my eye. I was in the park. I was working for the U.S. Department of Education. But anyway, I digress. And
Yeah.
And after
It's
that,
an amazing view up there.
What's that?
It's an amazing view when you get to the classified altitudes in the U2. See the
Oh,
full curvature of the Earth.
yeah. Is that in the stratosphere, or how high?
Yes.
Really? Oh. So if you went any higher, if you had to get back into Earth's atmosphere, you'd burn up.
Yeah, I wasn't capable of going quite that high, but and since it's still in use, I can't say the actual operational altitude, but what we're allowed to say is 70,000 feet. So we can say that,
Yeah.
but we can't say where it really went.
Oh, that's incredible. And then you went on to really get deep into physics with the being the main guy who would talk to the leaders in the Pentagon and whatnot. And what year
Yeah,
was that? Well, yeah, I'm just curious because I was actually in a DoD assignment at Fort Belvoir at the Defense Systems Management College.
Oh,
So,
yes, I've been through that twice. The second time was to get my senior program manager accreditation so that when I took over the F-22 as the program manager for the F-22, you had to have the senior course completed. I had done the first course for both program management and flight test and
oh,
got
isn't
those
that interesting?
certifications.
I was there in 1984 to 87.
Okay,
So,
I started my job in OSD at the time, the Program Analysis and Evaluation Office in 1998, and I was there
okay.
until just before 9/11 when I got reassigned to
Oh,
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I was actually due to be back there for a meeting on 9/11, but I had to have an emergency surgery, and I was in recuperation from that, and that
ah,
kept me from being there. But my old office was real close to where the airplane hit.
yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the guys I used to work with in the program analysis and evaluation office actually died that day
Oh my
in the
God.
Pentagon, but he wasn't in his office. He was on the very airplane that was hijacked, that was
Wow.
headed to a meeting in Los Angeles, and instead he ended up dying
Oh
very
my
near
God.
his office in that
Wow.
very plane.
Oh my God.
Wow.
How?
Very sad day.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
yeah, that's terrible.
What's that?
That's terrible.
Yeah,
I hear that. That's
yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
Yep.
I was actually there. I was working, I was in the Army Reserves at that point, and I remember the weekend, it was right before 9/11, and it was like a beautiful day. Same thing with being in DC on the day it happened. And I just felt like as soon as I heard it, first I heard about I went down into the gym in the basement of the building I was working in and saw the plane hit the Twin Tower. And then when I got back up
Mhm.
stairs, I found out it hit the Pentagon. And at that moment, I looked at everybody in my office. I said, I'm out of here. I said, we're at war. And I started
Right.
thinking about dirty bombs being in the underground and or the metro. And yeah, I was just really, it was a beautiful day. It was just so ironic. And I lived out in Damascus, Maryland. So I was living where the only place where the planes were flying, it was mostly the helicopters going to Camp David and back and forth, back and forth. And it was
Yeah.
just like, I felt like I was in a tunnel. Like I wanted to, like I was kind of hit over the head. But yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, that was my feel to it. Um,
Mm.
but you were working so besides flying and especially flying all these experimental aircraft, and I know you had some really really incredible accidents that we're fortunate that you're still here, and
True.
yeah, truly, and yeah, that means that someone in the universe has plans for you, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
But by the grace of God, I wouldn't be here.
absolutely, absolutely. And, and so you were actually, you were in England the same time I was, cause
Yes, I
but,
was there 79 to 84,
mhm.
and I know we had some
Uh-oh.
overlap then because you were there in 1980. I know you'd arrived earlier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was just really kind of like for me, and this is where I really want to understand the whole physics behind. Yeah, there was. Well, you read my book, my draft of
Hmm.
my book, not out yet, but it's mainly talking about. If I would say it in a nutshell, it would be. I think that there were some scientists that were doing some experiments. They were trying to make things look invisible, whatever, the whole radar jamming and stuff. And then something happened, and I really think that they pushed like punched a hole between realms, and I think that there was this energy that was coming out of it. Now, so I had to learn from my feeling and look up, okay, the recipe of using what we have, everything's made of carbon, all that good stuff, and how we can manipulate these ingredients that we have to, well, we created the atomic bomb. I mean, they came up with, well, why do something that's going to explode? Why not do it with more power if it implodes? Different things like that. And then I started reading up on Tesla and so many of the other physicists that I kind of think in some ways they were working with stuff that they knew about, but maybe they didn't know 100%. They knew it could do one thing, but they didn't look around to see what else it could do. And that's where, so when I got there, I felt it right off the bat. I mean, I felt it like knocked out my stamina, and I started to change. I started gaining all this weight. I was just really fighting. I mean, no 18, 19-year-old kid does not lose their stamina. That's difficult to stand up. So, so I was going through that. And, it was just a lot of different things that I felt. And then I saw the orbs. Now, you had seen, because I saw the video, you had seen an aircraft, a large aircraft, and it was still daylight near your golf course, near the golf course where you lived.
Actually, it was night. It was
Oh, okay.
10, yeah, it was around 10:15
Oh, okay.
p.m. So yeah, it was very noticeable that it had these changing lights all around the bottom, and it didn't look like light bulbs going on and off. It reminded me more of like what plasma in the glow mode would look like, and we're all familiar with that from things like neon lights. That's plasma in the glow mode. So the changing colors and the fact that it was sort of constantly changing just around the base, the bottom base, kind of going up on the sides a little bit too. And for me, it sort of implied that might be part of its propulsion, how it's actually defying gravity through electromagnetic forces, because the electromagnetic force is 10 to the 39th power. That's 1 with 39 zeros behind it, times the force of gravity. So gravity is extraordinarily weak in comparison to electromagnetic force. And you can demonstrate that to yourself with a simple paper clip on the table and a refrigerator magnet, something as simple and weak as that. You can put that over the paper clip and it will, even though the entire Earth's gravity is pulling on it, it will jump off the table and go to that magnet.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a mystery, because that's the first time I had ever encountered something that I couldn't identify, something that didn't behave like anything I had ever seen before. Certainly because it was able to instantaneously stop, not just slow down to a stop, not pull itself up like a helicopter might to stop, but just zipping in and then stop, and just totally steady and totally silent.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
that was
it's the kind of thing that unsettles you for sure. It really is not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I stood there looking at it for so long, because, as I said before in other interviews, having been fully trained as a combat-ready fighter pilot flying F-111s, one of the things that we were constantly tested on was aircraft recognition. Not only Soviet Union aircraft and helicopters, but all of the NATO aircraft and helicopters. so that we could identify friend from foe visually if we, encountered machines. And it was just nothing that I could put
Yeah.
it on. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen or was aware of.
Did you feel as if it had like it sensed you were there, or, um, there was a sense that it had, it doesn't have to be like a human intelligence, but it had like kind of an intelligence that it's kind of,
I did
yeah.
did feel that, and in fact, at one point, I actually walked away from my red Corvette and started walking towards it, and it reacted to that by starting to lower itself down between the two lines of trees. There were trees just beyond it and trees that were kind of guard trees for the golf course, so stray balls wouldn't hit cars, hopefully. And they were pretty thick along
Yeah.
there, and it was just up above all of that, but not much above. And so as I started walking toward it, it just started to come down. And so then I'm seeing that what I'll call plasma glow of lights around the bottom through the trees. And it was at that point, the fighter pilot in me was saying, I'd like to go see if I could hop in and take it for a spin, see what this thing will do. But of course, the the pragmatic person in me
Yeah, I got you.
knew what the stigma was on that, and what could happen to a pilot if that was something that you reported. So I quickly reversed course and said, this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Plus, I had no idea what getting close to electromagnetic field energy would do to the human body. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
so I had all those thoughts suddenly that said, this is not a good idea. And I left and kept it as a secret for 45 years. And that happened to be literally uh, in the same time frame of when the Rendlesham Forest incident was happening,
yeah, they said it was the
the
same.
26th.
Yeah, they said it was the same date.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
I
20th.
think the first one was on Christmas night, maybe. There was a sighting, and then the
Yeah.
26th was a rather big event
Yeah.
at in the I guess in the forest there.
Yeah. Well,
But Rendlesham Forest was seen something of a hub of some of the strange craft activities. And then, of course, they noted craft over the base and beams coming down into the weapon storage area. And that same, I later had found out. Of course, I didn't know about Rendlesham Forest at the time. That was kept very secret. We didn't hear about that at all at RAF Upper Hayford.
yeah.
But later, there was one that came on the podcast that Linda Moulton Howe has, Earth Files. And Moulton Howe was interviewing somebody, voice only, on this guy with the name Smith Jones, just to have a pseudonym.
Yeah.
And he was a staff sergeant at RAF Upper Hayford, and he was guarding a trailer with some weapons on it, waiting for the weapons personnel to come and store the weapons appropriately in the bunkers. And as he's making his rounds back and forth, as he made one turn, he's got his rifle, on his shoulder strap, and he's just being a sentry guarding the weapons. And he makes a turn, and suddenly here's this craft nose on to him. And because he was on a little bit of a berm, the craft itself was like dead level where they pointed straight at him. And he saw transparencies on the front, but didn't see any beings. And the way he described it, it sounds eerily like the craft I encountered, although I didn't see it from the perspective he did. He also got to see it later from directly below, because as they put the weapons away and came out of the weapon storage area, the craft was directly overhead them. And then it flew away from that, or moved away. However it was moving. It wasn't obviously flying, but it translated away. That occurrence was about 3 hours and 15 minutes after my occurrence. And my occurrence was not on the base, near the base. This golf course wasn't very far away. But yeah, I never knew about those on the base encounters. So mine was just before midnight, so about 10
Mm-hmm.
p.m. On the 26th. His was at 1:15 a.m. on December 27th.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
found that fascinating, and so I actually did send a proton mail to Linda Moulton Howe because she had requested on that show if anyone else had had encounters around that time frame to please let her know.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was still doing top secret work for the government, and I didn't want to out myself publicly, but I
Yeah.
did share the information to better complete the story. And I just said it's just not appropriate, I think, at this time for me to go on your show
Mm-hmm.
or do the Smith Jones things like you did with the other sergeant.
Yeah, I find a lot of the researchers that are out there, that often a lot of them just want to focus on December 26th, 27th, and 28th. So like the anything outside of that time frame, they don't want to look at. And I really think it does a disservice to the story because there are so many of the pieces of these puzzles that if we put it together, we'll find even a more complex story. And
I agree, and in your
yeah,
in your book, you actually bring some of that out, and you weren't the only one
mhm,
to have seen the things that you saw. I think at the East Gate,
yeah,
where it was
hmm
where, yeah.
yeah, we were,
So
yeah,
I think,
yeah, because I was on patrol, and but the weirdest thing is I mean, it was almost kind of humorous in a way that when we saw the aircraft coming in from the North Sea, the only place we thought we had A-10s going back and forth through to Simbach, Germany. So the
yeah,
first thought that went through my head was I was talking to this guy, my partner. I said, Keith, I said, can you check in the back to see if we have the forms for, we're going to have to do some customs work. I mean,
oh,
so I was preparing, thinking like law enforcement specialist. Well, I've got to do customs duty now. And I kept looking at the runway because we were at the back gate and the lights didn't go on. I was thinking something's wrong here. I mean, I was waiting for the blue lights to go on, and at least that was entertaining to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And
for sure.
then when it stopped right at the runway, and the way it stopped, just like you said, like just bam, stopped, and then it started moving geometrically, and it was one big. It was the one I seen. It was like a really bright white light. It was shaped like a football that was resting on the ground, say, and then it went up, down, left, right, kind of like the sign of the cross, and then it broke into three pieces and did a low arc, over
Oh,
the runway. Now, here was a problem that I had is that it didn't happen off base. And I was the lead patrol. So I did what every good airman would do. I handed my radio over to Keith. I said, you got to call this in. And then he hands the radio back to me. No, you got to call it in. I'm like, oh, because at that time, women were not, we were not wanted in law enforcement. I had no idea. I went in there thinking it was going to be action adventure, kind of like Charlie's Angels. I mean, I grew up in New York, Long Island, no bases. I had no idea about gate guards. I was hey, if I knew about this, I would not be in this career field. Um, but the other thing too, I was always very, very sensitive, even as a kid. And so, so I can feel things more than, seeing the individual trees in the forest. I could just feel like if something's off, like this place is not good. It's kind of like
yeah.
we should, something's wrong here. Something is definitely wrong here. And I don't like the way I feel. And I was even living on in the dormitories on base, and a lot of the guys were doing really not. We had some crazy stuff that people were doing. That some people were desperate to get out. They one guy stabbed himself because he felt like
Oh,
he said if I don't get out of here, I'm going to die. He goes, and I mean there was That wasn't like a once or twice. It happened. I probably 50, 60 guys doing things like that. And then we had a career sergeant steal a boatload of stuff from the sound center where you got the stereo equipment. And
Mm-hmm.
they caught him. He went back a second day, and he was living in the dorms, and they caught him with a harpoon as his weapon. I'm thinking, so he was crawling through the ceiling panels and all this stuff, and he's got a harpoon. And I'm just thinking to
Wow.
myself, what would that have been like? Mom, I'm okay. I almost got harpooned, but I'm okay. It was just like, this is not usual. And I could tell the difference between, well, people say, well, they're young guys, they're drinking, they're whatever. And I'm like, I went to 2, 3 other bases after, and I said, no, what happened over in England is not, that was not the norm. I got to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver. I didn't have any problems there. But my big thing was I was getting the hell out of law enforcement. And then I went to Nellis Air Force Base. I was in television production, which meant I was going to be videotaping bomb drops. But it was still, it was still fine. I didn't feel any. I did feel something once when I was in a Connex box. It felt like the world just went black. I was like, I felt the need to jump out and see that the world was still there. But that was the only time. But yeah. So anyway, I just
Well, it's interesting that your emotional reaction to the actual location was so strong, and that's very evident, in your writings in the book. You
Mhm.
really you really portray that to the point that as I was reading your book, I was feeling exactly, what you were describing. So I think that's very effective writing skill, and yet it was just on the base, right? You didn't feel that in your flat in town when
Oh no,
you lived up.
no, Wicker Market. It was almost as long as I got away from, I don't know, it's like 5, 6 miles away. I felt at peace. I felt normal. I didn't feel,
Yeah.
but on the base and around the base, yeah, it was. We had a war exercise called Sparrowhawk, and I could feel like when people were hiding in the shrubs. They gave us this thing: if you see somebody, or if you think somebody's there, call out the word snowbird, and if they're not the enemy, they'll call out the word melted ice. And I'm thinking, why would we do that? Because if it was the enemy, they would know we were here, and then the snowbird would be dead.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but
You just outed your location.
yeah, I never understood that. But I was walking with this guy, and all of a sudden I felt somebody. I stopped and I turned around, and I did that, and this guy in the woods said something, it's melted ice, and I'm thinking to myself, how did I know that? And it was more not a feeling based on, I heard the branches moving, or I did that. It was just a gut feeling, and it's.
A knowing inside
Yeah,
somehow. Yeah.
yeah, and it's yeah. I think about that. I think often, um, it's it seems to be it's always right on the money. It's like if I try and use my logic, it's not going to work. But I felt what I was writing was something important because it includes. I really wanted to go more into the physics because there's only so much you can do with the gut feeling. So I had to kind of repackage it to tell a story based on facts as opposed to, you know,
Yeah. I thought it was quite interesting about your telling about going to the library and just sort of finding this book
yeah.
on Nikola Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, how you read through that and you got some feeling about the kind of experiments he was doing, and of course his work was way ahead of its time, and a lot of people were very disturbed by some of the things he was working on, and they called his electromagnetic beam transmitter a death ray, and they just, they created a lot of ill will about it. And probably some of that was because, he had beaten out Westinghouse because they do the DC power, and he came up with alternating current, which was much more efficient and won the day. And that's why we have electrical wires all around, transmitting electricity on wires.
Yeah.
But yeah, his work with energy and directed energy, and the fact that he believed that you could cohere energy out of just the surrounding space and air and ground, that we could cohere energy and transmit it. Those were revolutionary ideas, but for people that own utility companies, that's very threatening. What, free energy?
Yeah.
Free energy, and you
Yeah.
can't send people a bill and become a millionaire or a billionaire.
Yeah.
So I think that his work was sidelined by greed and avarice for people that didn't want his inventions to come forward, because it would have been a transformational thing for society. So I think it's quite telling that even though he was such a genius brain, I mean, his inventions, he literally did all of the engineering in his mind to the point that when he built his prototype, it wasn't like a prototype, it was like a fully working thing that didn't need any changes. And it's because he did all that, what we would call digital engineering now.
Wow.
He
Yeah.
was doing that in his own mind, as opposed to building something and then having to tweak on it and make a modification to it. No, he was doing all of that in his head, which is astounding. And so I quite admire his brain.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah, very, very, probably you've studied a lot about Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of books. Yeah, you have to really you have to remember, like you said, that his work was kind of tamped down, so it was never taught in any of our schools or normal courses or anything. You really have to get in there and find the books and find the literature, and then see what he did, and then be able to understand it from a physics and an electronics standpoint, what the real meaning was of what he had done. You know what I mean? Because if you're an average person, you just hear, oh, Tesla, he was the father of our modern systems. You think, oh yeah, so what, or whatever, you know what I mean? But the reality of the matter is, like you said, is that he had these concepts in his mind, and he put it down. He made the apparatus to confirm it, and then developed it, in the late 1800s, you know what I mean? And into the early 1900s. So this is over 100 years ago. He did this with very rudimentary materials. You know what I mean? Because back then they didn't have all the fancy gadgetry and the refinement that we do now. I mean, who knows really if he was even working with copper wire at first. He may have been working with steel wire. You know what I mean? To some degree in his early experiments. Because who knows how much actual copper wire was available and what gauges were available or whatever. You know what I mean? And a lot of the stuff he did, he must have had to have formulated the formers and whatever to build his coils, and to be able to conceptualize the inductance. And I mean, because you didn't even have meters and stuff at that time, you know what I mean? Really, you had some rudimentary meters,
Right.
but everything he did, he had to do it conceptually in his mind, and then see it in action. You know what I mean? So talk about a pioneer. I mean, he was the man that really pioneered the AC network.
Mm-hmm.
That we still use today.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think my question would be, what would he say about how we're using directed energy now? I mean, I think I got the sense that he tended to want to do things to make society better, not as much as making it into a weapon. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just my thought.
Oh yeah. I don't think he had any idea.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't
I
think he had
mean,
any
yeah,
idea
you
of,
look at,
how cruel people are. I think he was a very good natured person, and he would trust that humanity would bring things forward in an adult fashion. You know what I mean? Instead of just instantaneously making weapons out of everything he did. You know what I mean? And then fighting over it and putting meters on everything, and creating this entire economy around the devices he made, and then push him to the side and ignore him from the history books for 100 years. It just shows you how vicious people are, really.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
sorry, I didn't mean to
we all
interrupt.
learned about Thomas Edison. No. I mean, we all learned about Thomas Edison, whatnot, and that was about it. And his associate. So
Yeah.
So did you guys ever talk when you were there? Did you know Barry
No.
when he was at Lakenheath?
Yeah.
No, I spent some time at Lakenheath, but it was only because the four-star general commander of the United States Air Forces Europe ordered me to go and put my radio mod into all the F-111s, including RAF Lakenheath. So I spent some time there. I had my wing commander give me a technical sergeant who was qualified to do the work that I had created, because I said, I'm happy to do this, but I'm not really certified to be doing wiring on these tactical
Yeah,
jets,
yeah.
What
even
year were
though
you at
I created
Lakenheath?
the prototype on one of our hangars.
That's 84.
Probably about 83. And I
Okay,
spent
because I could
as long as
almost
it took. I
swear,
actually fabricated all.
I think I saw you
Go
in the
ahead.
big hangar.
Did you?
I think so, in the big hangar.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I saw you in there one time. I mean, that's an image I have in my mind, and I'm pretty sure that I actually did see you there. One time in the big hangar. You remember that
Well,
big
that's a
hangar?
small world if that was the case.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yep.
That it is. It's a small world. You know what I mean? And then you were at Canon for a while too, weren't you? Or no?
And I did right after test pilot school. Of course, in test pilot school, I didn't fly the F-111 at all, but I had a lot of hours in it from my 4.5 years in England, and then of course 6 months or 7 months at Mountain Home, my initial
Yeah.
checkout. But after test pilot school, when I graduated, or just before I graduated, I was offered two different jobs. After I had flown the U-2, a small team from Beale Air Force Base came down from the SR-71, and they offered me the job to be their chief test pilot, aerospace engineer background, test pilot school graduate, to help everybody. I would fly the SR-71, but I would help everybody else understand the very uniqueness of its propulsion system and its airframe design. And that was very tempting, because I would have loved to have flown the SR-71 at least once, but I had this dream of being an F-16 fighter pilot, test pilot. and I had turned that assignment down that I had to go to Torrejon Air Base and be an operational F-16 pilot, because the test pilot school board called me up after I had put a deposit on a house and was about to PCS out, and said, they gave me a number of questions, wondered if I had made any financial commitments, have I moved household goods yet? And I said, no, they're supposed to come packing next Monday. Said, well, we need to know what you'd really want to do. Do you want to go to test pilot school, or do you want to go to the F-16 assignment in Spain? And I said, how long do I have to decide? And he said, now. It's a Friday, and they were finishing up that week's thing. And I was younger than, well, I was the youngest in history at that point to get selected for the test pilot school, and I didn't have the required minimum number of flight hours yet, nor did I have more than one fighter in my background, so I was not expected to get selected that early, but I thought if I took the assignment to the Torrejon, I could just mentally see this guy with a big red marker put an X across my application package and say, this guy's not really motivated and interested to be a test pilot, and yet it's what I dreamed of when I joined the Air Force. So I just quickly gave up the F-16 assignment to Spain and said, yes, I'd like to go to test pilot school. But then my dream was, okay, if I give that up, then maybe I can be an F-16 test pilot after I graduate. So I had the other job that I was being offered was to be a dual qualified F-111 and F-16 experimental test pilot at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And so in order to do that, they needed to give me a quick checkout in the F-111 again. And those were going to be F-111Es. We had 2 instrumented F-111Es at Eglin. But they needed me to go through a quick, get my landing currency back. And the only place that had a slot open for me to do that was Caton Air Force Base. So I went there and did a quick checkout in the F-111D model with all the digital cockpit. And then from that, showed up at Eglin and became their chief test pilot for the 111s. And then I got an F-16 checkout and became dual qualified and would fly both F-16s and flight test and F-111s. And it was a wonderful assignment. And I never regret that I gave up the SR-71 to do that, but sure wished I could have at least had one qualitative evaluation flight like I did in the U-2.
Oh, yeah.
It was a very expensive airplane to fly, and so that's not one that they just let anybody fly in just to go see how it worked. But, I got to fly 70 different models and types of aircraft and helicopter and the Goodyear blimp and hot air balloons and gliders and civilian airplanes and commercial airliners. It was amazing all the things that I was able to do once I became a test pilot and experience. So I look back and think I was very fortunate to have had those opportunities when I did and to have survived it all, as you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever think about the there was a after 9/11 several years later, they had a group of pilots get together, and these pilots were saying that there's something wrong with this picture because the aircraft and the aircraft pictures and the speeds and the maneuvers, it's really would have been very, very difficult, if not impossible, for these hijackers to have pulled off those maneuvers. Did you ever do any personal analysis on what you felt about that? Flying those aircraft that fast, that close to sea level, and everything.
No, I know that they, when they did their training, they had none of them seemed to ever really care about becoming good at landing.
Right.
They just wanted to learn the basics of not even takeoff, but how to just fly it once it was airborne.
Yeah.
So I think they were certainly very determined, and the plan was very devious, and it worked. It collapsed the entire World Trade Center, and of course demolished a section of the Pentagon, and the Pentagon was under renovation already, And that was sort of what saved a lot of the building, I think, is that the barrier walls that were being put in between those pie-shaped sections of the Pentagon were right next door to where the aircraft went in on the Pentagon hit, and it went in, I mean, literally right at the ground level and just plowed through. That that actually helped keep the fire from spreading to other parts of the Pentagon. Again, it happened right next to my old office there, so I was very thankful that I wasn't in the building at the time.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And nor that I was scheduled to be there for a meeting.
Yeah. I don't see how
Yeah, a
those
few of
guys
my
did it.
soldiers were actually in the building. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe we'll never know, or maybe we
Yeah.
will.
It's just,
I'm just
I don't
curious.
understand how those guys could have even done it. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, I've seen a lot of commentary from other pilots that have actually flown those type of planes, and they said that what they did is next to impossible for them to have accomplished that. You know what I mean? Because at those speeds, that close to sea level, they were trying to explain that those wings would have been distorting. The plane would have been almost unmanageable at those speeds. You know what I mean? That close to sea level. And, that aspect makes sense to me. But, I don't know. Something just doesn't seem quite right. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
maybe they realized they were on a kamikaze kind of a mode, and they said, well, we don't know where exactly we're going to hit, but we're going to hit it. Or,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think I would say, Lori, that's about right, because even if the airplanes had come apart in flight, it would have still caused a lot of death and destruction below ground, because they're going through New York City and to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's horrible. I remember.
As a little kid. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I was going to say, I remember as a little kid getting to when they first built the trade centers. You'd go into the elevator, and the first thing the guy would say, like I say, had to have somebody operate the elevator, was within the next 20 seconds, you were going to be a quarter of a mile into the sky. And we were like, oh my God, that's like, how? And it was just really, and then to think that it was no longer there. It was just, and I actually lost a couple of friends that I went to elementary school with were in the towers. So, it's really strange how it all affected. It all affected all of us. And, I think it was just a hollow for me, again, being sensitive. It felt very hollow. The whole thing felt like what's going on. And then of course I didn't really care. I was still like I said, I was still in active reserves and whatnot. And I was ready that we were going to go to war, and we were heading over to, which country we were supposed to head over to. I didn't think what's that? Afghanistan, thank you. I didn't think we were going to be heading over to Iraq. I mean, the whole thing.
I don't think any of us saw that.
Yeah, 1 + 1 did not equal 2. It was sort of like, okay, let's go over here. He's over, the Bin Laden's over there. Let's go over to Iraq. And anyway, but unfortunately, that's all politics. But back to, I still think, a lot of people are still focused on what happened in Suffolk County in England, and there are these ghost stories that I'm wondering about if that's part of the influence from the radiomagnetic, that maybe there are these beings that are crossing through this, whatever you want to call it, like this gel. It's almost like if you could tear a hole in one dimension into the next. And because it also makes sense to me that if anything, if anyone's coming into a country that are from other dimensions, they're not they're not aliens from this country, whatever, from other countries
Mm-hmm.
here, but they're literally coming from different dimensions, and they know how to fade in, they know how to fade out, they know how to you know create something that we can visually see, but but then again, they can also manipulate our minds to make us see something that
Yeah. I
good.
find it interesting for the TV series on Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah,
you've ever watched that,
yeah.
Yep.
but
I do see a similarity between the two. I really do,
yeah,
because it
there's a
just
lot of things there that manifest. There's apparitions. There's even,
Yep.
I don't know if you saw the most recent Weaponized podcast where they brought the leader of the OSAP, Lakatsky. He was the head of OSAP when that was a classified program,
mhm.
and they did a lot of work out at Skinwalker Ranch and documented a lot of those kind of occurrences. He even saw a human levitate out there. That was like a strange thing. So uh, all kinds of creatures would manifest, not just humanoid things,
Mhm.
but like these
Mhm.
giant wolf-like creatures on 2 feet and stuff. So
Yeah.
there's just this lore about it that seems like it's all made up because it's so unnatural to what we
Yeah.
have as a normal day-to-day experience, but yet they're documenting a lot of those same things right now through the work that's being done out there in The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is the
Mhm.
TV show on it. And I find that all fascinating, though I have, had one orb encounter that was kind of spooky, but for two of the encounters that they were clearly representing, or at least appearing as a very much a structured craft of some
Mhm.
kind.
Mhm.
The other one was much more bizarre because there was something that was causing that beam to come down directly on me and just encircle me when I got out of my hot tub, my jacuzzi. And at first I didn't even look up. I just thought somebody's out here snuck up on our, isolated property and is trying to play a joke on me.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in the horizontal, and it was kind of late at night, probably around midnight. And then I realized, oh wait, this thing makes a perfect circle around me, so it's got to be coming from above. And when I looked up, there it was. And as soon as I saw the source of the beam, and it looked like it focused together to a smaller point there,
Mhm.
so it wasn't just like one column. It was like, I call it like a slightly defocused laser, because if
Mhm.
your optics aren't right in a laser, the laser won't stay as a collimated small tight beam. It'll spread out some.
Mhm.
So that's how I describe it. And it had as I looked up through it, it had sort of a speckling nature to it, and it was a bluish greenish color, so a cyan kind of color.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
was odd. It wasn't like any kind of light that I'd ever observed. And the moment that I consciously thought, that's a craft,
Yeah.
then that beam that was on me went out, and I didn't have time to see what kind of a craft it was or
Mhm.
what its shape was, because immediately it blossomed into this sphere of plasma energy, white plasma
Mhm.
energy. And then moments later, that doubled in size, and then it doubled in size again. And those were not like it grew to that like an analog, it was like a quantum jump.
Yeah.
This, and then four times that. And when it got to this huge sphere of energy, you could tell that it's just started to accelerate super fast, and in a fraction of a second, it went from this slight indication of movement toward the west to just disappeared,
Mhm.
gone.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just the most bizarre thing. No sound whatsoever. and no
Yeah.
indications that it was ever there. It's just a, probably of all the occurrences, that one was the most intense because when I had first gone and talked to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp when they asked me to come out to LA, and I said I'm willing to tell the story, but I don't want to be unweaponized. And again, for the same reason that I didn't go on Linda Moulton Howe's Earth Files, I was still teaching directed energy weapons courses and did not want to interrupt that. I was enjoying teaching that to warfighters. But I did have a private discussion with them about it. And I didn't get to the fourth encounter, which was just an orb, because at the point that I talked about that craft, and I talked about the one that went right over me when I was out in the desert on Edwards Air Force Base stargazing, and that was a triangular craft, probably football field sized, pure black, no lighting whatsoever, just blanking out all the stars above me. And at the point that I talked about that third one over the hot tub, he just kind of leaned in and said, "They're tracking you."
Yeah.
And that just gave me that chills, like,
Yeah.
I never thought about that, but 10 years from the first encounter, from 1980 to 1990, when I'm a test pilot at Edwards. Actually, I was a test pilot instructor at that point. So there was a 10-year gap, and yet here I have this thing that I'm just all by myself out there, and this craft comes right over the top of me. And I found that to be so odd. And then many years after that, so about 2014 is when I had the hot tub thing happen. And now I'm not in California, I'm not in England, I'm in Florida. And it struck me that what if they are tracking me? And just like when the craft in the UK, that was over this golf course, there was nothing else around. It was just woods and an open golf course and a very lonely road where I was the only thing on it at that point. And the craft responded to me as I walked toward it by lowering itself. So it felt like there is some sort of a conscious connection here, but it's not like I got any kind of telepathic information or anything like that, but just this feeling of, why did it stop at that point? And I could look around, and the only thing that was maybe interesting was me in this car. So why would it otherwise have done that? It didn't make sense. It's not like it was already there and I just came upon it. It was moving fairly rapidly and came up from behind me and just stopped beside me.
Yeah.
And that was
Timing
just
factor.
shocking. Like, what made it stop? Why is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
It's happening.
timing.
I really did think a lot, about why George Knapp might be right. Maybe I am being tracked. I don't know why I'm being tracked or what purpose it would be. Nor can I say definitively, even for the 1980 encounter, I cannot definitively say that wasn't a reverse engineered something that we did. I just can't figure out why it would be doing what it was doing, where it was doing at all these bases. And it turns out on the Linda Moulton Howe's show, she revealed that there had been sightings at RAF Alconbury as well, which is one of the, I think, a radio communications hub for a lot of the things that were going on with our USAF forces. So, you got the twin bases of Woodbridge, Bentwaters, the definite sighting on and just off of RAF Upper Hayford, RAF Alconbury, and maybe even RAF Fairford. And she mentioned several bases where people had sighted it along the same time frame. So it makes sense that if whatever it is can travel to get to this one place, it's no problem for them to make those relatively, by their speeds terms, short hops around.
Time travel.
Of course, the nuclear weapons
Yeah.
thing is very much a component of all that,
Yeah.
and seems to be to this day.
Yeah.
Anything-
Well, again, when you start looking at all the all the energy that's saturated, thermonuclear, whatever. It's I mean, it's been over 100 years that they've been they've been playing around with Einstein's theory of relativity or whatnot, trying to create something and not realizing the residue of what it leaves behind. I think there's a huge, kind of like you mentioned about the Walker Ranch. The same thing. It's like it's been disturbed so many times. I found the only thing that I experienced that was left with me, and it actually sometimes it doesn't come out right away. Sometimes it comes out a decade or so later or whatnot, and it came out in dreams. That when I found out back in '96 that the UFO had come back in December of '80. I had left. I left England. I left Bentwaters December 15th. In fact, I flew out commercial because they gave me a port call for December 26th. And I said, "There's no way in hell I'm leaving. I'm going to sit around not realizing that, who knows, maybe I was supposed to be there on December 26th, but I changed that rule. I said, no way. So anyway, I kept having these dreams that I was at Bentwaters. I'm over in England, and I keep telling her, I said, no, I'm not. I don't work here. I don't do that job. I'm an officer now. Blah blah blah. And then next thing I know, I'm driving down this dusty road. I mean, it goes from this damp, dark green. Everything's dark, and next thing you know, I'm in the desert, and I'm driving down this road, and I come upon this pond of water that looks so peaceful, and I'm like, what is this place? And that was a dream I would have constantly. And then one day I get a National Geographic copy. This was back in '96. I had a gorilla on the front cover, and I'm flipping through it. There's a complimentary copy. I love the photos in National Geographic. So I'm flipping through it, and all of a sudden I see the pond, and I'm like, oh my God, that's it. That's in my dream. And it was this place called Palo Azul. And the more I started looking it up, I found out it's not close, but it's about 40 miles from the zone of silence, where they have a lot of high activity of UFO activity, and it's known for not having any frequencies. It's like a frequency zero. So if you go to Chihuahua in Mexico and go to the zone of silence, they have really odd looking trees, a lot of shrubs that aren't supposed to look the color that they are, just the shapes. And then they have the other thing they had was I knew Pleiades had a part in it too, but I couldn't figure out. I was trying to put the connections together, and then I found out that in Pleiades there are these three beings that walk around, and if you get stuck in the desert, they will help you, and they ask for a glass of water, and if you say, well, where are you from, they look up in the sky, like point, and I'm thinking, well, where's the connection in England? And it turned out it's about not even half a mile from RAF Woodbridge, Sutton Hoo. They have these mounds that are shaped like the star cluster Pleiades. And it's like, this is really kind of freaky now, but but the fact that we were talking about energy, energy type of experiments going on, and then all of a sudden it's connecting me to this place in Mexico, and apparently there was a connection from there to Alamogordo, where apparently they did a lot of tests out on white sands, and I had been there and actually went on into white sands itself. I thought it was beautiful. And then I and apparently a lot of some of their experiments or machinery was found out near a zone of silence area. So
Yeah.
but
Well, Holloman Air Force Base.
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah, that's the base. Yeah, I was there
Spent some time there.
for one of the exercises that they had in the summertime. It was fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't connect. You just spend your life connecting the dots and whatnot.
Right.
But I also
Yeah.
had the
Yeah, it's
feeling,
very
same thing
crazy.
with Barry
Yeah.
about the
Yeah,
mantid.
it's weird.
I had no idea,
Very weird.
and a lot of these things I'm learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm learning as I go. Yeah. Were you gonna say Barry?
Oh, I was saying it's very weird. Like you said, how am I
Barry?
part of this? Yeah, can you hear me? You know,
Yeah.
it's like how
Yeah.
am I part of this? You know what I mean? All my life, these weird idiosyncrasies have happened to me. I didn't ask for any of this, but yet it's been one, like 60 plus years of, interconnectivity with the paranormal or unseen forces or whatever. And, it got to the point where I just don't know what to think anymore. It doesn't seem to be affecting me too much, but I do notice that what I see on TV with all these guys, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, Skinwalker Ranch, all these things, they're getting dosed with it now. They can see it. It's on the media, it's on YouTube. Other people can see what we've experienced for decades. Now it's being brought forth so that, and like you say, James Lukatsky and other people involved in government investigating all this stuff and everything. And as a matter of fact, I've got here, it's another book, Colonel John B. Alexander. You guys ever heard of John Alexander? He wrote this book, Reality
Yes,
Denied.
he's
Great
very
title.
connected to Skinwalker.
Yeah, and he was involved with the
I'm gonna have to check
government
that one out.
investigating all this stuff. He's got an entire plethora of incidents in here that most people have never even heard of. But it's, and that just shows you that the government has been onto this for a long, long time, and this is all coming out now. For everybody to see. So it's not like us oddballs or anything, you know what I mean? Because everybody's getting dosed with it, you know what I mean? It's like, so I don't know where it's all going, you know what I mean? But it's out there for everybody to see now,
True.
Yeah. But I did exactly what you guys did when I had those experiences with the mantid. I didn't see the mantid with my eyes. It was more or less he put something in my mind, and it was like a flash, like a photo of this tall praying mantis kind of a guy. Looked like he was pacing back and forth, and he told me, "Don't go." Meaning don't go in the direction I'm walking. And I was actually in the bomb dump right up against the forest. And as soon as I saw him, I'm like, I'm going back to my gate check. I'll start checking my buildings when it becomes daylight. Because right now, he's told me he's busy, he's focused. I have no idea what he's focused on, but I'm said, just let him do his thing, and maybe he'll go back underground or something, but I never told anybody. I never. I knew that would be a ticket to be thrown out of the Air Force. Like that one. And then I saw the Colonel Thompson, who was he died in an aircraft accident at during an air show. Where his aircraft, apparently they said they found something like foreign object down. They found something inside near the, I guess where they do the steering part of the aircraft, and he couldn't move it. But he had just gotten to Bentwaters, and so he died not long after that. But the funny thing is, I'm standing at the gate, and all these sergeants are hating on me. I mean, they couldn't stand me, and I really couldn't stand them either because they were just jerks. And I noticed, I look behind me, I see this colonel in a flight suit, and he's leaning against these boxes, smoking a cigarette. And I'm looking at him. First thing I noticed, I said, "Oh man, he doesn't have his hat on." He was a full bird colonel, didn't have his hat on. I'm like, ugh, because I knew as soon as the patrol came by, they'd say, "Rehfeldt, why didn't you tell him to put his hat on?" Blah blah blah. I felt like that because he's a full bird colonel. It's like, come on, I'm sorry, but that was the highest rank on our base. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to scold him. Say, "Excuse me, sir, could you please put your hat on? You know, you wear the hat outside. Not, I know, not on the flight line or anywhere near the aircraft. Do me, please." So I'm like dying, thinking, well, how am I going to say this to him? He seems pretty laid back and nice, whatever. And I turn around, and he's gone, and I'm going, and we had at this point, the East Gate, it was like this, we had a perimeter road that would go off base, but it followed the runway. So if you walk 2 steps out into the middle of the road, and most of the time it was nothing was going on, I walked out in the middle of the road to see where he went, because there was a fence all the way around. There's no way he could have gotten by me or whatnot. But I was thinking somehow maybe, he slipped out, because it was even along the fence line, the perimeter road, there was a fence on one side, and then it was the runway, and it was like open. And I didn't see him, So again, that was one of those stories that I actually shared it once at the advent of the internet. We just got Netscape, and I decided to 95 or something, and I decided to type in. I shared the story of what I just shared with you, and I got a call from his daughter, and she told me, she goes, "You described him to a T." And I always get a lot of feedback like that it corroborates it, and I'm thinking, yeah. Well, as I said, next time, even as a ghost, he should know to wear his flight cap, okay? But
Yeah.
but I could tell that he must have been a really, I think he liked to party, to be honest with you. That's the kind of that's the vibe that I got from him. But he was, yeah. So, and then then we had so I had several experiences. Then we had the swamp man. We had there was this area over. Did I mention that in the story? In the book?
Don't think.
It's probably in my first book, The Rendlesham Lone Ranger. Yeah. I just, something about the locks area. It was right on Bentwaters near the Ivy Lodge gate. And at night, I just got this bad vibe that I said, I got to get out of here. Whatever's here is scaring the heck out of me. And I knew in my gut that there was a pond on the other side of the fence, which would have been off base. But I couldn't see it because it was all overgrown. And it wasn't until I got onto Google Earth, and then sure enough, there was a pond there. And that kind of creeped me out too. That it's like, I knew that, and I knew about the swamp man, and he wasn't happy. And I think they also had this place called Rendlesham Hall that was a huge mansion that they actually turned it into a psychiatric facility. So I was kind of wondering if that had something to do with, maybe they called it something with the inebriates. So who knows? Maybe he was trying to get to Ivy Lodge and get a drink. I don't know, and he fell in the pond. Who knows? But no, it's creepy on one level, and sometimes you gotta laugh a little bit because it's so creepy. I mean, it's so these things are trying to put
There's
it
a
all
time
together, and
yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a time.
and all of these stories, I kept to myself, still wondering what happened. It's like what. I don't have stories like this from my other bases, and but I kind of feel like it's funny though. I did talk to somebody, and they said, well, they had these different things going on at the different bases that I was at. I mean, they had this R&D place over at Fort Belvoir where they were doing some stuff with I think remote viewing, something like that, and they said, maybe you weren't really, maybe you were being tracked too. It's like they kind of maybe keep their eye on maybe people who have who are open to that energy. I mean, that's what and you look at it. It doesn't mean you can say, well, I'm not highly intuitive, but I still get it. But I think you.
But there are people like you who are more emotionally in tune.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is that way. She's incredible. You'll be in a restaurant and she will sense what's going on several tables away, not hearing it, but
Yeah.
And then she'll say, "Hey, look back over your right shoulder and don't do it obvious. Don't do it right now." But then she'll describe the table and stuff, and she'll say what she feels is going on with the couple and the kids, and it's uncanny because I guess I'm too science brain minded, and my emotional part is a little bit maybe hard of hearing, hard of sensing.
But what's interesting though is that you have a lot of these what you've witnessed over time. It shows that there's something important, I think, based on what your knowledge is and what you're able to process. I mean, you can nail down the equations and whatnot, and show different answers or directions of where things should go or whatnot. That in some ways, that too is a gift. It's a that.
Well, it's definitely not. It's not something that was unnatural. I was just kind of that way from my earliest days. Figuring things out, taking stuff apart, figuring out how things worked, excelling in math, loving physics, and just aerospace engineering was challenging at Georgia Tech, but I loved it. I loved learning what I learned. I loved it in grad school, and then the Air Force just kept. I guess when they sensed and saw it in my job performance, they just kept giving me more school opportunities. I think they put me through 12 different colleges and universities during my 30-year career, paid for it all, and just kept giving me advanced degrees. So I never wanted a PhD, so I kind of refused that, because if you get a PhD as a pilot, your flying career is pretty much over, and then just go send you off to be a professor at Air Force Institute of Technology or something. And that wasn't really my goal, so I kind of just kept it always at the Master of Science level.
I have a friend that was an electrician at Bentwaters, and she ended up becoming an electrical engineer, and she told me, and I mean, when it was going on, she said, "Yeah, I decided." She made staff sergeant, just like Barry, really really fast, and she said to me, she goes, "Yeah, I was." They told me to go take the test to become tech sergeant, and she said, but I declined it. And I said, "What do you mean you declined it? It's kind of like it's extra money in your pocket and all this stuff, right? What'd you decline it for?" And she said, "Because I knew that if I became a tech sergeant, I would do more paperwork and I loved working on the aircraft. She loved figuring out problems of what was going on with
Yeah.
the electrical, any issue. She was a great roommate too, because she her name's Katie, and she I'd come home to the flat in Wickham Market, and sure enough, she had rewired my bedroom so I could turn off and on the light without getting out of bed.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, you mentioned that in this
yeah,
latest book. I thought
yeah,
that was quite
yeah.
interesting that you ended up with a roommate that was resourceful and helpful and that you got
Oh
along
yeah.
with very well.
Well, she was always the kind. I mean, she's logical like you are, but she'd always look at things like, "Have you ever thought about?" And in some cases, she made me seem logical. No, Katie, I've never thought about doing that. I actually went to visit her and her family in Hawaii once, and she she all of a sudden she saw somebody hitchhiking. You know, this guy looked all
Hmm.
raggedy and whatnot, and she stopped to pick him up and to come on in the car. And I just tightened up. I'm like, I can't believe you did that. I mean, da da da. But I didn't say anything because now we got this man sitting behind us. We don't know him. And all of a sudden he starts rummaging in his pockets. Now I'm really freaking out. I'm like, I was hating on her right now. I hate you, Katie, right now. Later, I'll still like you. And sure enough, he's pulling out his ID. I'm really okay. Here's my ID. So we gave him a ride. And then after we left, so, she's generous, but, sometimes it just got a little bit, you're stressing me out. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, it was fun. But she's one of the few people that I've actually shared her being at Bentwater at the same time I was, and sharing
Yeah.
the experiences and stuff. And it was a lot of fun. But
It's a hard thing to do, isn't it? I mean, because there was so much stigma and trying to keep it all bottled in. It really was, I guess, relieving to finally be able to share it.
oh, yeah,
Um, but
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
In fact, I found that that's been the biggest need. That's why I set up this podcast, because I need to share my story, and by talking with others, I learn from them. I mean, we're
yes,
talking about this plasma, we're talking about this stuff that has really affected my life, as it's affected Barry. I mean, why am I still talking
yeah,
about Bentwaters? I mean, I'm almost 67. Why am I still talking about this place? Because it's got a hold on me, and I kind of wonder about that. Why does it have a hold on me? I mean,
yeah.
but something tells me that it's something that I need to do, and when I'm having these conversations with you, and getting feedback, it really is comforting. It really is,
Yes.
because back then, like you had to suck it up. You couldn't talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
it. So they take away the curiosity, where maybe you could learn something from it, and then you know, because I think all of us want to put this in a rational perspective, and to say
Of course we do.
this is what this is. Now, one last question before we go. Do you think it is possible that with all this, with using physics, that you could actually? I'm trying to find that Dalton book. Oh, there it is. That you could actually, I don't know if you can see it, parallel worlds.
Parallel
Yeah,
worlds. Hmm.
that you could actually create some kind of a hole or a tear, or some way that other beings could get through to our planet.
Well, let me preface my answer about that with, I was a student of um, Einstein's theories of special relativity and general relativity, and the cosmological models about the Big Bang and stuff like that. But as I did a lot of my own research and discovered other things, I became more of a proponent of electric universe theory and plasma cosmology as being more representative of what the universe is really like.
Yes.
No, because if you take the assumption that Einstein made is that gravity is the only force available to the universe, and that space was empty and void of anything else. But now we know, and it's being proven more and more by the James Webb Space Telescope, and because its spectrum in the infrared is so broad and so high resolution, we are seeing the electrical connectivity of everything. And it turns out that under plasma cosmology and electric universe theory, the electromagnetic force is the dominant force in the universe, and that everything is connected. I find that rather comforting because I am, I believe in God. I'm a Christian. I believe in these things, even though I'm a scientist. I have a very strong spiritual core as well. And to me, the connectedness of it makes a lot more sense than just this accidental poof and the universe just coalesces by purely gravity, which is the weakest of all forces.
Yes,
In
yes.
fact, right after James Clerk Maxwell came up with the equations of his electromagnetic theory, there were many of his fellow scientists who were thinking about the implications to what the force of gravity is, and many of them theorized that if we were really able to solve this adequately, we might find that gravity is literally an artifact, a very minor artifact of the electromagnetic force.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
find that fascinating.
Yeah, no,
But
I
I
do
think
too.
it went off the rails for me when they started manipulating Einstein's general relativity to come up with a theory of a black hole. And they allowed themselves to do something that no other science or mathematical or anything is allowed to do, and that is divide by zero. So they say that a black hole has at its core infinitely dense mass, but in infinitely small space.
Oh,
And so that's allowing themselves to divide by zero twice to get these infinitely small and infinitely dense.
yeah.
And so I don't find that to be consistent. And even Einstein, when he first came up with his black hole theory, he said, I think that's a misuse of my equations. But I think that, Einstein was never a theoretical physicist. He was, an experimental. He didn't actually do experiments and do validations. He was just he did it all as mind excursions, thinking things through, and he came up with special relativity and general relativity. And he was a patent clerk when he came up with these things in his head. So, but yet he became this really famous guy, and I think it stunted our understanding of the universe quite a bit for now 100 years. And I think that may change in the future because the predictions that have been made by those who are experts in electric universe theory have been spot on accurate and proven out now by the James Webb Space Telescope. Whereas if you look at mainstream astronomy, everything they get from the James Webb, they label it with, we have no idea what this is. This doesn't match our theory. It doesn't comport with what we expected. And it's proven that the universe is not 13.7 billion years old like the Big Bang said it was. But the Big Bang theory sounded cool at first, and of course it was I think Lemaitre, who was also a Jesuit priest. He wanted to have something that was sort of more conform to biblical view of God creating it in this great event. And unfortunately, when that took hold, they then began to find cracks in it right away, like all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, the expansion had to be greater than the speed of light for things to be the way we're observing them. Therefore, they added inflation theory to say that, well, there was a period right after the Big Bang where everything expanded at greater than the speed of light, which again, Einstein said there's no such thing as something greater than the speed of
Yeah.
light. And I disagree with him on that as well. But then they started adding other things, like when Vera Rubin started studying galaxy rotations of the outer stars and realizing that the further you went out from the center of the galaxy, the more those stars' rotational thing did not match what gravitational equations would get you, what Newton's equations would say. And so, because of the fact that everybody in mainstream is saying, well, there's the only thing out there is gravity, so they
No.
started trying to invent more gravity and they called it dark matter. And they said, well, it's something we can't see. It's not baryonic matter like everything else we can see. And then they diddled with it in their supercomputers. And in the supercomputer, they could distribute this completely theoretical thing in such a way that it would make galaxies behave the way they observe them. And then they started for the last, 25 years trying to prove what it is. And I think there's like 53 different theoretical forms of it, and they've not found one iota of any of it to prove out. So then beyond that, they invented dark energy and said that now we think that the universe is expanding faster and faster and that gravity's not ever going to pull it back together. And so that there must be another force out there that's causing this expansion rate. And they get to that because they're misusing Edwin Hubble's work when the Hubble Space Telescope, named after Edwin, an early astronomer who was the first one to discover that Andromeda was another separate galaxy and not just a star cluster within our galaxy. And he was the first astronomer to apply spectroscopy to look at light wave shifts in astronomy. And then people immediately assumed that all redshift in the spectroscope must mean that it's moving away from us faster. And if it's a blue shift, it's moving toward us. And even Edwin Hubble said, I don't think that you can attribute all redshift to be simply Doppler shift. I don't believe that's true. There can be intrinsic forms of why that's that way. And his protege, who was studying under him, Halton Arp, died recently within the last couple of years. He went on to study galaxies and quasars and found direct connections between quasars that had a tremendous redshift separate from the galaxy, but were still connected to the galaxy and sitting out in front of it, where astronomy is calling that body a separate galaxy and saying it's 13 billion light years away, when this other thing's like, maybe 100 million light years away, and this thing's sitting in front of it, between us and it, and not behind it. And you could actually see in certain wavelengths the connectivity. And then as he studied them, he realized that when a quasar burps out of the center of the galaxy, it goes into sort of a long elliptical orbit around the parent galaxy and ends up settling in like our large and small Magellanic clouds around the Milky Way as being these smaller orbiting sort of like children galaxies of the parent.
Oh, interesting.
And that as they do that, the redshift starts out to be very high, and then it goes in quantum intervals. And eventually, as it settles in, it becomes the same redshift as its parent galaxy. And that seems to be the phenomenon that happens all over. So in electric universe and plasma cosmology theory, the center of a galaxy is actually a plasmoid, which we wouldn't be able to see. It would just look like a black hole. And a plasmoid you can actually create in the lab with a plasma focus gun. It's so much concentration of electromagnetic energy that it tangles up like a ball of rubber bands. It's just this enormous amount of energy. And that's what feeds the Birkeland currents that can be visualized now, that go out and create the spiral arms, and stars form from a Z-pinch effect of these Birkeland currents, condensing matter down into stars, not from a gravitational collapse. So I think that as I look at all that and then I look at mainstream science, I am now so far removed
Mm-hmm.
from the current mainstream theories that I can't really effectively comment on somebody like Michio Kaku, who was the author of the book that you just showed,
Mm-hmm.
and what those theories are. Because to me, it's like they've inserted so many garden gnomes, as I like to call
Mm-hmm.
them, garden gnomes. Like I have some Irish blood,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Oh, I did
say that
too.
my great grandmother came from Ireland, and maybe she really believed in garden gnomes,
Mm-hmm.
and so she goes to bed one night, wakes up the next morning, and her lawn chair's fallen over, and she'll say, "See, the garden gnomes knocked my chair over." You know,
But, yeah,
never
she
mind the
probably
fact that there was
says,
a windstorm that
she
night.
probably
Yeah.
said, Jesus, Mary, and Holy Saint Joseph.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that all these things that they've added in, inflation theory, uh, black holes, dark matter, dark energy, at this point, mainstream science says the universe that we can see and measure with our telescopes is only 4% of the universe, and the rest of it is all of these garden gnomes. And it's just, to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it doesn't make any logical sense anymore.
No,
And
no.
it doesn't have to be that complicated. But yeah,
Well, it's interesting that we've got these plasma balls. They're all over the place. I mean, it's not just,
yeah.
and you kind of wonder if maybe, I mean, have they always been there, or is there an increase in them with all the, all this technology we have? What's, but it was definitely there. I know in England, but I know they were doing all those crazy cobra mist and all those different experiments. And
I don't know how far you've looked back into ancient history, but not only in the
oh
Bible, but
yeah,
way back before that in the Sumerian texts
mm-hmm.
that have been discovered, the cuneiform tablets. Now that those have been deciphered, my gosh, the stories that they tell are about uh, a race of beings that came to the earth and helped create who we are. The Anunnaki
Mm-hmm.
and Enlil and all these different names they had for them that are in the cuneiform tablets. The stories that are in the Bible, particularly many of the Old Testament stories, if you read some of the apocryphal books, which were in the original King James Bible,
Mm-hmm.
he had all the apocryphal books there. In fact, if you were caught in the 1600s without all the books that were in his authorized King James, you were put in the dungeon in the Church of England for a year
Oh
as
yeah,
punishment.
no. I think
But
this book was written by a woman. Let's get rid of that one.
but the
Seriously.
Book of Enoch and there are several others in there. But even of the ones that are in sort of the canonized Bible, um, when you think of the Ezekiel and the wheels within a wheel and these creatures that flew, would they put it? But they put wings on them because birds were the only thing they knew of that flew. Did they have literal physical wings, or were they levitating? And were they, using anti-gravity craft, or what was that?
Yeah.
I think if you looked at that in modern terms, you'd say those are UFOs or UAPs, and
Mm-hmm.
they're being described in the only ways they knew, because chariot wheels were about the most complex invention they were dealing with back then.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So a chariot wheel was like wheels in a wheel, and all these descriptions sound more like a rotating saucer type craft than just wheels off a chariot.
Oh yeah. No, and you look at also Aristotle and who's the other one? Trying to think. Of course, the names escape me. A lot of these guys from what's it, Diego? Anyway, the guy that created, he even had the schematic of what a helicopter looks like, the drawing, and Michelangelo. I don't know if that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And then you got the Da Vinci. Okay, and then you've got the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and you
hmm
know, and then we've got the whole uh, Native American, the indigenous people, their stories, how, and that's really goes deep into the Skinwalker Ranch. It's don't want to mess around with them. But yeah, so yeah, it's a lot of stuff. What's that? Oh, so you're on. You haven't gone away.
Yeah, you're there.
Illinois. Oh yes.
Yes.
We got him. We got Barry. Okay,
Nope,
we don't
no,
have
went
we
away.
don't have Barry. Barry, come back. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up, and yeah, if you ever point me in a direction of a lot of what I've written about, I really tried hard to stay away from what people would call the woo, like, oh,
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I do think there's a place for the woo,
Well, and I think that, what the woo is, we don't know, but there's an element to it that certainly goes beyond just physics and metallurgy and things like that. There is just something about this that is not fitting, doesn't comport with mainstream science. But then again, I'm not arrogant enough to think that we know all the science there is.
Yeah.
And I also believe that if you think about the speed of light is because it waves. It's a wave. Well, what's it waving through? How do we get the light from stars and stuff? If it's a wave travels through a medium.
Yes.
And back in the late 1800s, they called it the ether. But then when they did the Michelson-Morley experiments, they assumed it was an ether composed of some sort of a gas. And that didn't turn out to be, it didn't turn out to be the way they thought it was, so they just dismissed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is an ether. It's called dark plasma in the dark mode. And the space it's way more electrically connective than a copper wire.
Yeah, probably save us a boatload of money too with our electric bill. But I still, like I said, I'm such a neophyte when it comes to this stuff. But I just think that, when you have an experience and you want to put it in such a way that, for people to listen to, for people to really listen, understand, that's why I think it's important to bring someone like you and Barry's caliber to the table and discuss it. I mean,
Well, I wish I had the writing skills that you do. You have a very wonderful writing skills. It's very descriptive, and it really took me to the places that you described. Your words transported me there.
oh,
So I
thank you
think
so
I would
much.
highly encourage that you continue writing because I think that's one of the gifts you were given is
I
the
think
ability
so. Yes.
to tell those stories the way you did and make it flow so that it's not just a stream of facts. You're putting in the other elements that are less tangible, your feelings, how you felt in the scenario, in the situation, and how that was different from the location of the base to your location where you lived,
Yeah.
and how you had to kind of come out of that mode when you left your job.
Mm-hmm.
And was one of the things I think that convinced you, yeah, that maybe not staying there the extra year that you originally volunteered was a better decision to just move on and get out. So
Yeah. No.
you didn't encounter that in other places.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I never felt any of that at RAF Upper Hayford. But then again, we're 100 and something miles west of that location in Oxfordshire. So maybe, there weren't those same kind of experiments. Maybe things weren't as disturbed as they were from Orford Ness and some of the other experiments that were going on there with very high energy radar and beyond the horizon detection stuff.
Yeah. I think if your wife was there, she would have said, honey, let's get out of here. She said, no, this is not a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny the way that works. I'll just share one last story with you. Is when I was at Defense Systems Management College, the colonel that was there, he decided to have everybody at DSMC, the staff and whatnot, have us all take the Myers-Briggs test. So we all took the test.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a staff sergeant now, and I'm kind of quiet about things, but with a dry sense of humor. And so, I took the test, and about a day later, he sends for me. He said, I need to talk to Sergeant Rehfeldt. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? So I walk into his office. I said, hello. I don't even know if I reported or not, but and he said to me, do me a favor, turn around. And I turned around. He said, what color shirt am I wearing? I'm like, I think it's maybe light blue or light green. I don't know, because I don't pay attention to those. Turn around, he's wearing this yellow shirt. And then he started saying things. He said, it was almost as if he was describing me, and he really didn't know me. And it was almost like, oh my God, how did you know that about me? He said, if somebody did something like this, you would probably, I don't know, you'd want to help them, where other people would probably say, no, let it go. But it was so, maybe I was so classic. He said, I just have one question for you. What are you doing in the Air Force? And I thought I was in a therapy session. By that point, I'm like, well, my mom was poor, and I couldn't, and there weren't any jobs out there, so I figured I'd go into the Air Force. They'll take care of me, they'll feed me, and all this, and and then he was like, well, how did you survive for this long? And I looked at him. I said, well, you know what? Now that you put it that way, they need people like me. So,
Yeah.
so and then when I became an officer, that was a lot of fun, because all those people that used to be really mean had to bite their tongues. It's like, Lieutenant Rehfeldt, well, I don't think we could do it that way. No, we're going to do it that way. I mean, but they put me into some really fun jobs. I was a platoon leader for a bakery platoon. And all they wanted to do was talk about baking bread. I said, no. We're making bread. I'm going to get the ingredients. We're going to make it. So we made a couple of hundred loaves of bread, and, all of a sudden these generals and colonels would come over, and we'd hand them out, hot bread fresh out of the oven. It was like, oh, do you want
Heart winner.
Yeah. I was like, oh, would you like raisin bread? We have that too. So it was good times, but yeah.
Yeah, I took the Myers-Briggs test 3 times in my career. Each time got the same result. Guess what it was?
Let me guess. You're probably borderline E&I, extrovert, introvert, I think. You are you're an N, you're intuitive, you're sensing, and you're a J, judgmental. You like things to come to closure. So that would be an INSJ.
ENTP, consistently.
Wow.
And my E factor was off the charts, right on the limits of it. So
you
very
would have been
extrovert.
hanging out with Colonel Thompson.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's a strange combination, but I think if you look back at the things I did, the things I invented, the things I pushed forward, my mind was always in that thinking, creating, solving problems that weren't my job. The things I invented at RAF Lakenheath had nothing to do with my job, but they helped us all do our job better, more efficiently, and safer. So in the end, I wasn't doing it for any purpose of recognition, but they documented all that in my officer performance reports, and I think that's really what the test pilot school selection board saw, is that this guy would make a good test pilot. So that's why they picked me so early, and I'm quite thrilled that they did because those were my goals. I saw that one video on TV late night when the Star Spangled Banner would usually come on, the flags waving, and then they would sign off to test pattern.
Yeah.
This one night, it was an Air Force commercial, I later learned. F-104 Starfighter taking off, and then they had all this dramatic orchestral music, and then as it kind of calmed down, this deep voiced narrator comes on, and he's narrating the John Gillespie McGee Jr. high flight poem. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced on laughter's silvered wings.
Yeah.
High in the sunlit silence. So it's like that affected me so much that in that moment, I knew I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and that's what I set my mind on. And then as I delved more into fighter pilots, I ran into all the stories and the history of Chuck Yeager.
Yeah. I read all his books.
That's what I really want to be, is an experimental test pilot. He was my inspiration for that. So I said, well, if I want to try to go in the Air Force, I can't afford to go to school, so I'll see if I can get an Air Force scholarship. And they gave me a full ride pilot scholarship, and I chose Georgia Tech because they had the #1 aerospace engineering school in the country, and that's an important degree to have if you want to be, I guess, academically suitable for that career field. And then Georgia Tech turned me down because I had skipped a year of high school, and but I'd taken some summer school courses because I was just in a hurry to get on with it, get into college, So I made an appointment with the dean of admissions and said, why'd you turn me down? He said, well, you don't have 2 years of high school calculus. I said, well, even if and he said, and also you skipped a year of high school. I said, well, even if I'd stayed another year, they didn't offer any kind of calculus at my backwoods school that I went to in Tennessee. So I said, don't you have tutoring program here for your athletes and stuff? He says, yeah. And I said, well, I'll be there every night, and I guarantee I'll make an A first quarter. And then if I make an A first quarter, won't I be on at least a level playing field, if not maybe a little bit better than the students who didn't quite make an A in first quarter when you go into second quarter calculus? He says, well, yeah, if you could do that. And I said, I don't think you don't understand how motivated I am. I want to be an experimental test pilot. I have a full ride scholarship, go to any school in the country as long as I got an ROTC program. I choose Georgia Tech because you got the best aerospace engineering school in the country. And he says, but that's our toughest curriculum. I said, well, good, because then I'll be more prepared.
Yeah.
I said, they also will be watching my grades. And if I don't make a 3.0, that's a B average, out of 4.0, every quarter I'm here, they'll pull me out of here. And I'm already signed on the dotted line. So I'm basically an enlisted reservist now. So then I'll go and have to be enlisted and maybe a crew chief working on those airplanes instead of flying them. And I said, and I'm not going to let that happen because I want to be in it, flying it, and become a test pilot.
Yeah. Wow.
So right now, there's only one thing standing between me and my goal, and it's you.
Yeah.
Won't you please give me a chance? And he reversed his decision and let me go. And I did go to every single tutoring session every night of the week. And I did make an A in everything that first quarter, and then it was pretty easy going from there. It's a tough school.
Yeah.
So I really worked hard, but the degree has done me a lot of good.
Yeah, but you worked really, really, really hard to get it. Yeah, really reminds me, it's a kind of a different obstacle since we both started at, poor. Picking the career field I picked with the law enforcement, my first performance appraisal was a 7, and a 7 is not good when everybody else is getting a 9. It was just because my supervisor, he hardly ever talked to me, let alone whatever. But that was it, and he said that was satisfactory, so you thought, well, I guess that's okay. Satisfied. And then it dawned on me when I was getting ready to test for staff sergeant. I actually sat down and wrote out the numbers and figured out the scores I would have to get to make staff sergeant. And I had to make at least a 98 on both tests. And most guys that are getting promoted staff sergeant, they just have to make a 50%. So I took the
Wow.
test. Okay, I took the test. I studied like you. I was motivated. I studied
Mhm.
my butt off for a year. I mean, I was walking around with the manuals in my hand wherever I was going. People were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to read a little bit every day. I highlighted everything to the point that I literally memorized it. I memorized these books to the point. I mean, I've never done that before in my life, but in this case, I did. I'd go in, I'd sit at the desk, I'm taking the test. The answers are flying off the pages. I mean, verbatim. It's like, yeah, I saw that sentence on page 34, you know. And I walked out saying, oh my God, I made staff sergeant. I know I did because I got 100. I got 100 on both tests. The scores came out about 3 months later, and I didn't hear. I was so excited, anxious. I was waiting for them to say my name. You know, oh, congratulations, Sergeant Rehfeldt. And I didn't hear anything, nothing. And I thought this is weird. So I went over to SEBA personnel, and I went up to the people that were taking care of the scores, and I said, I took the test and I know I did really well, and I'm expecting to see my name on it. And he said flat out to me, what's your name? And then he said to me flat out, no one gets 100 on both tests. I'm like, what do you mean no one gets 100? If you have a test and the answer's on there, how could that be? He said, no one gets 100. So he said, but the only thing we can do is, so technically he said I was cheating. And then he said, but what we can do is we can have you retake the tests now, and then you can, we'll see what happens. So I retook the tests because it'd been now couple of 3-4 months since I studied, right? So I retook the tests. The answers were still flying off the page, and I ended up with a 98 on both tests. And I ended up, I did make staff sergeant. But
That's great.
but it was the same fire that I had in my stomach that you had. It's like, by God, I'm not, because I didn't want to let these sergeants, keep me down just because they didn't like me, and because I always knew in my heart, I said, I'm better than the way I'm being treated, and it just kept that in my mind. And and then I got my degree, and then the next thing you know, I'm in the Army and still speaking the Air Force language. Flight, platoon, hang on, I'll get it. And then the rank structure is like, once you got over E6, I'm like, didn't want to offend anyone. I started calling everyone, Command Sergeant Major, could you come over here, please? And he said, no, I'm Master Sergeant. And I'm like, well, if you had your stripes that looked different, I would have called you a Senior Master Sergeant, okay? But so I speak Air Force, but Army's my second language. Anyway, that's my story.
So all the services are quite different, Yeah. I've worked with all of them, and it's a whole different culture. I mean, we're all one fighting force jointly, and that's great. But, when I've been out to aircraft carriers or out working with the Marines in the field and with the Army guys, it's a different culture in each of the services, and I appreciate each of them for what they are and why they have that and how it works for them.
Yeah.
And I've worked with great people in all the different services. And I've flown a lot of Navy jets and some Marine Corps craft too, helicopters and like F-18. I flew one of the early A-model F-18s before the Super Hornet came out. Flew with a Marine guy. And it's kind of interesting because, when you get to go fly these things as a test pilot, you log first pilot time, and if you sit in the front seat or the left seat or the right seat, whichever is the command control seat, that's where you sit. You don't do any simulators. You don't do any training. You just use your test pilot education and you go figure it out. You look at the flight manual, you memorize the emergency procedures, and off you go. And I've taken out many a single seat, even single seat, single engine airplanes, or single seat, two engine like the A-10, and flown those aircraft without any prior training whatsoever, and gone out and actually employed the 30 millimeter
Wow.
GAU-8 Avenger gun in the A-10 on practice targets
Oh yeah.
in
No.
the Eglin Range. So it was like, how would a country boy with no, I mean, we grew up poor, kind of like you did, didn't have the money to go to college.
Mhm.
How could I achieve all of that? And how lucky was I? Well, I don't think it's luck necessarily. It was a lot of hard work.
Mhm.
It was a lot of dedication, but there was never once in all the things I flew, never once that I didn't have the conscious thought when I took off, got airborne, I would look around real quick before things got real busy, and I'd have the conscious thought, I can't believe they actually pay me to do this.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
had that
Yeah.
thought from day one
Mhm.
to the very last flight I ever did with the military.
Wow. Yeah. No. Yeah. When I was at Nellis, I got to, because I was in television production at that point. I got to do some aerial photography, but they weren't ready yet to have a woman in the back seat of a fighter. I really wanted it, and I mean, we were flying out over the ranges at Nellis, and man, we were hitting some. I was in a C, what was it, C-141, and that thing was like yanking and banking and doing it. It felt like a huge roller coaster ride, and it got to a point where I belted myself in the cockpit area in the back, and one of the guys, the navigator looked at me and said, "Here, you look like you need a bag." I said, "No, no, no, I don't need a bag. I'm good. I just have to be belted in because I'm going to pass out." I didn't pass out though, but I was wide.
141 is a sporty airplane. I have actually flown one. I've flown various versions of the C-130, and that is a very agile airplane for a big cargo airplane.
Yeah.
And doing those assault landings and stuff, it's quite dramatic. Swap ins, come in really steep so you avoid the shoulder man pads kind of things. You basically are coming in not just like a normal approach, but coming in and it's really steep and swapping ends and
Yeah.
landing in short field.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. We were at 2,000 feet. Next thing you know, bam, we're down to like 300 feet. And I was climbing up that little metal ladder to get
Yeah.
and I had the camera on my shoulder. I was like, and then my supervisor was in the cockpit already. And I said, "Mike." He was trying to make it. He was trying to make it that I wouldn't fly, but I was still determined. And then I went to.
I flew a lot of photo chase missions at Eglin for weapons deliveries, and some of those were our first ever 9G separation test for the AMRAAM missile off the F-15, because the F-15 got the priority to be the first aircraft to go operational with the advanced medium-range air-to-air missile. And my job was to be in perfect formation to get my photog in the back seat, who's carrying those metal high-speed film cameras. I don't know, they weighed quite a bit. They weren't light.
No, I know what you're talking about.
And these guys were the beefiest guys we had. None of them could pass the weight standards. And they put them in the dump tanks, and they had almost no fat. It was muscle.
Yeah.
Because they had to hold that camera at 9Gs, because we're pulling 9Gs with the F-15.
Oh my God.
And at 9 times force of gravity, they're getting perfectly focused, framed, high-speed video of that missile separation. And then we get back to the ground, and we would put these movies on Friday nights in the squadron and just show off the skills, because I actually, one of my jobs was I was in charge of all the photogs and got to know them all really well and fly with them all. And I said, let's start showing some of these videos. Just don't leave them for engineers to review. Let's put them up on the screen, have some popcorn, beers, or whatever, and praise these guys' work, Look at the quality of what they did. Those photogs were absolutely amazing skills.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do that. Just the wrong sex at that time.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. I did get to fly in a bunch of different helicopters. I was on the exercise a green flag, and that was fun. I mean, I got to a point where I wasn't even flying with the U.S. I was flying with the French. Ah, young American. And like, yeah, that's me. Anyway, well, let's wrap it up. And I just want to say I thank you, Dan and Barry. You both have been amazing, and I look forward to getting this podcast up and running. Yeah, Barry, you're the best. He's been so influential. No,
Yeah,
Dan.
Barry's a great guy.
Yeah,
Barry
yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of knowledge. Yeah.
And so this is God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.
They told us how to survive. But not where we were standing. No one said anything about the air. Cold ground boots on the line, same routine every night. Nothing changed, that's what I thought, till the silence started talking back. Engine screamed, pressure climbed, felt it shift but no design. No report, no words, no clue, just something moving through. No signal, no command, just something you don't understand. No one gave me a memo, no one said prepare for the weight and the silence or the charge in the air. No one gave me a memo, no one drew the line where the world stops behaving the way it's designed. The way it's designed. Radar sweeps, spending light. Things don't track the way they should. Men walk in, men walk out. Something leaves them hollowed out. Eyes don't lie, voices shake like something followed them awake. You don't ask, you don't say, you just count another day. You feel it, you don't speak. Like the ground is getting weak. No one gave me a memo, no one said be aware of the shift in the pattern of something already there. No one gave me a memo, no one told us why things don't follow the rules they're supposed to comply. What if it's not the night? What if it's not the light? What if it's something we built, something we don't control? Fields on fields,